Oh, quite a cute reading, really, isn't it? From the gospel. It's a great example of perhaps Jesus's wit or his insight or the way he is able to speak to and communicate those who are trying to trip him up. One thing I've been quite aware of these last few weeks is how lack of aware I am of things going round about me. Does anyone else have that experience? You ever got somewhere in the car and you realize you have no idea if those lights were red or green, or how many cars you've overtaken, or who you've left behind when you're meant to have taken? Occasionally, that's a feeling that I have, that I can go through life almost with my eyes shut because I'm so distracted. And I think that this setting of this gospel is at a time when Jesus is wanting his listeners, his disciples, and everyone around to perhaps be a little bit more aware of where they are, of who's around about them, and what world they're living in. How aware are his disciples? And Jesus himself is someone who is acutely aware of those that come to him. And it says there that he knows why they're coming to entrap him. And the word that's used there to put Jesus to the test is exactly the same word that's used when Jesus goes into the wilderness and is put to the test by the devil. So I think Matthew, in writing here, wants us to be absolutely sure that this is not a clever and genuine question, but in fact, it's something to try and catch Jesus out. Jesus, who's been saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, your mind, everything that you are. The Jesus that invites certain people to sell everything they've got and to follow him. And the Jesus for whom a few people left everything and got up and followed. Suddenly he's being asked, should we pay taxes to the emperor or not? And I think that was a genuine question. Do you pay taxes to some organization that you really don't like, don't trust, and wish weren't there? Or do we have a responsibility to where we live? And the first thing is, are we aware that what we carry in our pockets? Because I wonder if the Pharisees were truly aware of what they had in their pocket. In the temple, this is a religious setting. In the temple, the Pharisee brings out an inscription, a coin with an inscription on it, that most of the religious people of that time would have thought was blasphemous. It contained the image of the emperor, and it probably said on it, on the denarius, this is Tiberius, or whoever it was, the Son of God, divine Tiberius, the Son of God. There is a blasphemous statement which those people were using. I wonder how aware the Pharisees were that when Jesus says, show me a coin, the first thing that they produce is not the temple shekel, but it's the coin of the emperor, which they brought into that holy place. The other thing I think we need to be aware of is that there is a saying, it's not one I completely understand or agree with, but some people have said to me, have you heard so-and-so? They're so heavenly minded, they're no earthly use. Anyone heard that expression before? So heavenly minded, no earthly use? I'm actually not sure that's valid, but I do know there are some people for whom doubt is not a feature in their life. They're absolutely sure and certain of themselves of what they're doing, that there's no room for compromise, there's no room for question or doing things. And if we're in that place, we are ignoring the fact that God has placed us in a particular situation. We're in that situation to do good, to be light, to be salt, and to make a difference. But sometimes there are things that we need to be made aware of. There are things that need to be changed. And Jesus was not frightened of shying away from the things that needed to be changed. He wasn't frightened of telling his disciples. He wasn't frightened of telling the authorities. I hope he's not frightened to tell me either, that there are things in my life that he wants to see changed. I won't say that for you, because you'll know whether there's things in your life that you want God to speak to you about. But how aware are we that God is saying, what are you carrying in your pocket? What image does the things that you see important, what image is born on those things that you see important? Because Jesus looks at us, and this is part of the parables of judgment, and talks about judgment. And at the very last verse of the Thessalonians passage talks about Jesus rescuing us from the wrath that's coming. And earlier on in the Gospels, we hear John the Baptist talking about the chaff that Jesus is going to burn away. I don't like to think of that as individuals, but I like to think of it as things in my life that just don't need to be there and need to be got rid of, but I can't get rid of it. And so as Jesus is challenging people to be aware that there are things that need to change, I think he's inviting us to put ourselves into that position. So rather than just being what is a very clever answer to a question that was designed to entrap him, I think Jesus is calling us back to what is real, what's genuine, and what's important in our lives. So if we were to ask ourselves, how do we give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and what are the things that are God that we need to give back to God? We're going to break out in a minute or so into some breakout rooms, and perhaps within our congregations. Dare we actually say, what are the things that we consider that are ours and that we can offer back to God? And what are the things that we've been given stewardship of that perhaps we need to remember we're part of the kingdom in which there are Caesars and other things that have call on our lives? But ultimately, there is a king that is coming. And the Christian hope is that Jesus Christ will be that king. At this moment, we have the opportunity to invite him to be king of our lives, and then to take that reality as we go about. But I think that we are reminded that at the end of time, today's a resurrection. We're called to remind ourselves of resurrection. So just as we remind ourselves that this life will end, it doesn't end for good. Or perhaps it does end for good. It does end, but it ends in a way where we are walking with Christ. So what are the things that call us to be aware of God's image in our life? Can we bear that image as we go out and about? So I wonder if that's a question we dare ask ourselves. What's important? What can we offer to God and to the world in which we are?